Andrew Miller, Tarik LaCour from Hook'emHeadlines.com and the Hook'em Horn Show. We got a special guest today, Adam Lunt. We're excited to have a guest on. I know you do a lot with Oklahoma State, covering them. You, do you still have your own podcast? I should have asked you that before we jumped on here, but just to plug some of your stuff.
Yeah, I don't have any stuff. I'm total just normal dude. Was never part of the media or anything, but I did a podcast called Tape Doesn't Lie for 3 seasons for OSU. Oddly enough, we did it started in 2018, was one of the worst seasons in a long time. So shows you I have really good timing. So I have nothing to plug other than it's hard to give up watching football a lot. So I still watch it pretty religiously and kind of stay engaged. And other than that, I appreciate you all having me on. So
yeah, no, love to have you. I've said this in a few articles I've written this week, but it feels fitting that, Texas is playing Oklahoma State before leaving the Big 12. From the Texas perspective, last stop on the revenge tour, Oklahoma State is the only team that beat them last season that they haven't played this year because they didn't get them on the regular season schedule after the Big 12 added the 4 new teams. Gundy's been a thorn in the side of Texas. I think Oklahoma State's won 6 of the last 8 games in this series. And so, interesting game this weekend for the Big 12 championship game. We got number 7 Texas against number 18 Oklahoma State in the CFP rankings that released about an hour or two ago. Texas, I believe, opened up as an 11.5 point favorite. That is spiked now to 14.5 points in favor of Texas. Game kicks at 11 a.m., so we got an early one out in Arlington. Adam, I know you said you'll be at the game. I will be as well. Tarik, are you going to be at the game on Saturday?
No, I'll be watching from home.
Gotcha. So it should be an exciting one. I think this is going to be the best crowd we've had at the Big 12 championship game in quite a while, too, because you got the the last chance to keep the Big 12 Big 12 championship in conference against, I think probably the biggest fan base in the Big 12. So it's going to be a sea of orange, regardless of what shade of orange you're wearing on Saturday. And so, coming into this game, I've given some of my thoughts on the site already this week. I'm of the mindset that Texas in pretty much every position group, maybe outside of running back because Jonathan Brooks is out for the season. Even CJ Baxter suffered kind of a stinger last week. So running back Oklahoma State might have the edge, but in most other position groups like Texas, they just got NFL talent everywhere. But you never know with Mike Gundy. You never know what he's going to pull out to beat a team like Texas. I always kind of get that feeling, whether it was Gary Patterson at TCU or Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State now, that he could always have some tricks up his sleeve. But what are y'all's thoughts, just kind of off the top headed into this game?
Well, actually, I'm glad that we're playing Oklahoma State rather than Oklahoma because I really didn't want the rematch. I also wanted for Sark to get revenge on Gundy before he left, so this worked out great for Texas. It's I think it shapes up to be a interesting game for about the first 2 quarters or so, and then I expect Texas to kind of run away with it. But so I think it'll be good for Texas to play who I think is the best coach in the Big 12, and Mike Gundy. I expect Gundy to have them prepared. And one thing you can always count on Mike Gundy for is he'll always get his teams up for Texas. He always seemed to care about that game more than he cared about Bedlam. I don't know why that is, but it's always seemed that way to me. So I think it'll be a good matchup, but I expect Texas to come out on top and win convincingly. So,
yeah, I think it's kind of a fun matchup. The scheme offensively on both teams are actually kind of remarkably similar, which is kind of interesting. Like you mentioned, Andrew, Texas just probably across the board has a talent advantage in certain areas, and I think really a lot of the game will come down to, I think, is it's been well circulated that OSU's been kind of a Jekyll and Hyde all year, where they've got some good wins on the resume and some egregiously bad losses. So it's you know, I've seen a lot of the initial reactions, and I certainly know that Texas fans are confident, which to a certain degree I'm not sure I blame them. Um, but I will say that as a person that follows the team closely, if you can get that team to execute well and at a high level, let's say at its highest level of season, um, I think that's basically the avenue where it could be a good game. So that's kind of that what if that we're all wondering could happen. So, wishful thinking, obviously from an Oklahoma State perspective, that's what you'd like to see is really sound, mistake-free football. But we really haven't seen it all that much. I mean, maybe Cincinnati and K-State, maybe 2 games out of 11 so far. So yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting. It's a lot of interesting matchups too, as well. So
one of the things
sorry, go ahead, Andrew. I think what's different to me in thinking about this Texas game versus Oklahoma State is this is like the first time in a long, long while Oklahoma State doesn't have a quarterback that worries me. So that's like last year, Spencer Sanders, he just had a way of finding a way where he shouldn't have. And before that, you had other quarterbacks who did, but Bowman, Morton scared me more than Bowman did. So,
I mean, yeah, Spencer Sanders for the last few years, I feel like for Oklahoma State, especially against a DC like Pete Kwiatkowski that has had issues with dual threat quarterbacks in the last couple of years. Spencer Sanders gave Texas issues, and then also Adam, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this for Alan Bowman versus the Alan Bowman versus Spencer Sanders debate. I feel like Spencer Sanders masked some of the issues that Oklahoma State might have had, where like I don't think the offensive line's been very good at Oklahoma State the last few years watching them, and I think that the running game hasn't. Jalen Warren was good in 21, but I don't think the running game was very consistent last season, to say the least.
The run game last year was terrible.
Yeah.
And even I think they had accepted that pretty early on. If you go back to like the Central Michigan game where they basically kind of ran out and were like, all right, we're going to throw it every down, and we're going to run super high, hyper fast and throw the ball, because I think they knew pretty early on that they weren't going to be able to run the ball. So, which kind of ultimately led to, I wouldn't say a significant scheme shift, but a pretty decent shift this year into more of a downhill run game that's actually uber similar to what Sark runs at Texas, which is really great to see from my perspective, because I've always admired Sark in his run scheme as well. So, but regarding Spencer Sanders, and Alan Bowman, it's really interesting because obviously Spencer Sanders has much more like dynamic playmaking ability. But he was also like really, really limited on decision making. He's not a fast decision maker. And I think that kind of held him back, took a lot of sacks, a lot of turnovers and things. And oddly enough, that's kind of where Bowman kind of thrives. It actually pisses a lot of OSU fans off because he ends up throwing a lot of balls away. He does not take sacks at all. And I think his completion percentage is 60%. I can guarantee you it's not because he's not accurate. It's because he has 8 throwaways per game, and he makes super fast decisions. So it's kind of like what Spencer Sanders struggled with, Bowman is good, and then vice versa. In terms of like top end quarterback play, it's kind of hard to say because this is more of like a run focused OSU team. So I think Bowman, they're basically trying to complement the pass game and pair it with the run game, which is a little bit different than what we've seen in past years. But obviously top end talent Sanders is considerably more talented than Bowman. So
I saw a stat the other day going through PFF. Tarik, I know you know this. I'm kind of a data nerd when it comes to like going through different like situational stats. I like just seeing data sets and numbers and seeing what I can do there. But like Alan Bowman has 39 throwaways this season, 9 most than the quarterback with the second most throwaways in the FBS. And I think the most since like 2020 from any FBS quarterback. you watch Oklahoma State, you see pretty much the second that the pocket is in danger of collapsing, he's trying to get away from the pressure and throw it out of bounds. So definitely, yeah, something that it kind of fits Gundy in a weird way, where it's like that ultra conservative mindset that, lets you to some degree stay on schedule. You can still run the ball. You don't get put behind the sticks too far. So
it's interesting because it kind of pairs with the scheme too, because this basically is a downhill run RPO pass team. So like, when you're passing an RPO set, you got basically one read, and if it's not there, it's too late. You got to run the ball because it's legal man downfield. So I think Bowman, that fits him, because I don't know if you all remember, but at Texas Tech, I mean, he had some pretty crazy injuries. I think can't remember, did he have a punctured lung or something like that?
Two times, 2 separate seasons.
So this is a guy that doesn't like to take hits, and I mean, I can't say I blame him. So you kind of add all that together, and you get a situation where, it's kind of a quick hit pass offense. It's either there or he's getting out of the pocket, throwing the ball, maybe checking it down. But there are not situations where he's stepping into the pocket, trying to go through a second, third, fourth and progression and trying to get the ball out. Like that's not what he's doing, nor is what the plays they're calling as well. So.
Yeah, and I think to some degree that might be the offensive line, but also Oklahoma State's had some receiver injuries this year. I think DeJon Stribling was kind of their primary guy on the outside. Correct me if I'm wrong. At the beginning of the season, he broke his hand, I think it was, and out for the rest of the year. Like week 2 or 3.
At one point, I think it was the Cincinnati game. They were basically down to Brennan Presley, who's pretty much the whole year been like maybe their number 1 or 1A guy, and like their 5th and 6th receivers, and they've slowly gotten a few guys back. But the receivers that you all will see out there on Saturday are certainly not the opening day starters. I mean, there's been a lot of injuries. Oddly enough, though, that there's been some really high quality play from those guys as well, in which a few weeks back a lot of people were really concerned. They've had some guys step up, and it really hasn't been the issue that a lot of people thought it was. So thankfully.
Yeah, I saw Jaden Bray come back last week, so that actually was something I wanted to bring up a little bit later, was potential weapons for Oklahoma State outside of the obvious for Ollie Gordon and Brennan Presley. But, talking about the quarterbacks and, Alan Bowman, someone that, you talked about injuries similar to Quinn Ewers in a way, where Quinn Ewers hasn't had a season-ending injury, but he has had 2 shoulder injuries the last 2 seasons at Texas. And I think there's been some issues with Quinn Ewers going through progressions in the pocket, or at least being able to fully make it through maybe a second or a third progression before throwing the ball away or just taking a sack. Tarik, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, and then maybe Adam as well. What if you've watched some Quinn Ewers this year, kind of what you've seen from him year over year? I'll say this: Shane and I on our show we did for just kind of a high level Big 12 game preview or Big 12 championship game preview 2 days ago. I said that Quinn Ewers just played okay against Tech. I don't think he was a standout by any means. He had a couple underthrows. I think he's been taking too many sacks when he gets over 3 seconds to throw, where he should be able to get outside of the pocket and at least throw the ball away, or maybe find his second or third read. Like I said, Tarik, I'll pass it over to you. What are some of your thoughts on Ewers and, just him going through his progression, staying composed in the pocket here recently?
I think post-injury, he hasn't done as well as he had pre-injury. He had been better at stepping up in the pocket, getting out of the pocket before he got hurt. So that's a concern. He did make a few throws against Tech that still showed you, like, yeah, it's still there. Like when he ran out of the pocket and threw on a rope to Jatavian Sanders and things like that. The throw that concerned me the most was the one where he had no air on the ball when he was throwing it in the end zone to A.D. Mitchell against a 5'9" corner. So yeah, that was bad. But so that's a cause for concern, but he is still coming back from the injury. He's clearly still recovering. And psychologically, after you get hurt, you do happen to be, you'll be a bit more tentative. You won't be exactly where you were before, but I think he's played good. I think he was playing great pre-injury, but so that's where I am with Ewers.
Yeah, I'll say I've watched Quinn Ewers since he was like a sophomore in high school, so I've got a lot of years under the belt, kind of seeing. It's been kind of fun to see his progression. My wife went to South Lake Carroll, side of the family. My father-in-law lives right across the street from the high school, so it's been interesting to see. I mean, obviously he popped off the tape, real early on. We're like, wow, this kid can throw it a mile. I think the biggest thing Quinn Ewers, like if I'm a defensive coordinator and I'm facing Quinn Ewers, the best part he has going for him is like he can hit the 20-yard out from the wide side, and that's scary. When you're a field corner like that, you're in an you're doing off coverage, and you're basically trying to keep the deep ball, and you can't really do that against Quinn Ewers because he can hit that throw. And I think Tarik, I think you were referencing that where he kind of stepped in and stepped out and then threw like a scramble ball to Sanders, which was a really impressive throw last week versus Tech. That type of playmaking ability where he's just got that sidearm. It's super impressive. I think the downside is that he really hasn't made it, in as far as I've seen, very limited progressions in terms of like turning into what I call like a real quarterback. Like I call him a scheme it up quarterback. Like Sark does an amazing job of just gift wrapping him these play action plays where Worthy's got 10 yards of separation and it's real easy, or these glance routes with RPOs and things like that. And he's good at it. But if you get to the point where it's in pass only situations where run's not a threat and he's got to make a few reads, like Quinn Ewers, I feel like still struggles with that a little bit. And I'm actually kind of surprised he doesn't have. I think he only has like 6 picks on the year, 7 picks maybe. He's always been kind of that guy that I think was a high velocity INT guy, but I kind of figured he'd have more than that. But nonetheless, I mean, still a top end quarterback if you need him to be. I agree with your assessment on the pick. It needs to get more air on it. But,
only 5 this year.
Oh, only 5. So there you go. And he only had 5 or 6 last year. 3 of them against OSU though. So maybe that'll be a trend.
A few of those were not entirely his fault, but yes.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I think that I do think Ewers is having a great season. I think he's shown a lot of progression. I just think that in the last 2 weeks, again, there's been situations where I just don't think he's seeing the field as well as he was pre-injury, and he's getting 4 or 5 seconds back there sometimes, and still the play's resulting in a sack with a 3-man rush. Yeah, and again, he was making plays with his legs earlier in the year. I just don't think we're going to see that same quarterback. Maybe in the postseason, but probably not this weekend. Okay, so moving on to just like talking about some of the expectations that we think each team is coming in with in this game. So Steve Sarkisian in his press conference this week was talking about, okay, we're not focused on the playoff. We're focused on taking care of the business at hand this week. And I fully believe him. I think Texas is going to come in juiced up this weekend. Especially with them, still being at number 7 in the playoff rankings, they're going to be looking to make another statement. Outside of that, I do think that something that caught my eye was a comment from Gundy about Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat that says, we'll block them like we would essentially block any other defensive lineman. I know that Gundy gave them some compliments, but then there was like a tweet from Horn Sports about that quote from Gundy, and then Byron Murphy quote tweeted it and said 11 a.m. We had a similar situation last week with Iowa State in the sense of Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat getting up for the game. Mike Gundy was not near the degree of what Jared Hufford said about Texas and the defensive line. But I do still think you don't really need to give any added motivation to Murphy and Sweat, and maybe that was something for them. That's just one thing that kind of stuck out to me. if Texas ends up in a situation where they might hit some shot plays early or get out to the start that they have in the last few weeks, where I do think they're moving the ball and they're moving the ball effectively, against Iowa State, against TCU even, and against oh my God, I'm losing it, Texas Tech last week. I think that Texas offensively was moving the ball very, very well. And regardless if it, you had penalties against Iowa State that negated 2 touchdowns in the first half. You had against Texas Tech, they were, I think, they were still able to score a lot in that game. And then you had TCU, where you just ran into kind of a multitude of issues after the first half, but they were still up 26-7 by the start of the third quarter. And so, Adam, I think you kind of answered my question. Just I probably should have asked that better of, if Texas is able to get off to a fast start here, is there, I guess, then would there be any chance for Oklahoma State to come back? Now, this is something else that I've noticed about Oklahoma State this season, and I think it's the most obvious thing with them. A lot of Texas people I've seen have been asking on like message boards and stuff how UCF was able to contain Ollie Gordon in that game. And correct me if I'm wrong there, but Ollie Gordon's Ollie Gordon's lack of production in that game wasn't because of his own doing. It was because Oklahoma State was taken off script pretty much from the start of the game, and everything that went wrong, everything that could really possibly go wrong for them did. There was turnovers. I think they were pretty bad on special teams. UCF was hitting all sorts of big plays on them, running the ball effectively. Do you think there's a way for Oklahoma State to kind of get started in this game or hang around if they're not hanging with Texas shot for shot, or do you think it's more dependent on the Oklahoma State defense?
Yeah, I think your assessment of the UCF game is pretty odd. I mean, they actually got off to a pretty good start offensively against UCF. And I was going to say that these are 2 bad red zone offenses, so this is like a perfect segue into that of, they basically, I think their first 2 offensive possessions, both of them ended up inside the 25-yard line and 2 turnovers. I don't know exactly the yard lines. I can't remember. But 2 timely turnovers, and then gave up a few big plays. And then all of a sudden, it's 17 or 21 to nothing, starts pouring rain, and it's just downhill from there. So I think, I think in general, like if I was Sark, I would want definitely to get off to a fast start offensively, to try to bury OSU in a hole, because this is a pretty simple passing attack. And also, too, have in mind that historically OSU has been almost an elite vertical deep passing team, and that's not this team anymore. They have pivoted, and they are more of a, this is a short tactical passing team, which doesn't really lead you to it's not exactly very conducive to eating up big leads, even though they've done a pretty good job of coming back recently. So I think related to like Ollie Gordon, another thing that I think trends towards Texas as well is Ollie Gordon has been significantly better in the second half than they have in the first half. And that was a reason why he didn't do much against UCF. They were down by so much. He only had, I think, 10 or 11 carries. They got in such a hole so fast that they took him out of the game. And I know that this is painfully obvious. Of course, you want to get up to a big lead. But I think in this particular context, it's even more important because those styles of play really play into that. So obviously, OSU wants to do the invert of that. They want to get off, not necessarily to a fast start, but they want to get off to an even start, I think, is the way that I would phrase that.
Yeah, okay. That's fair. I think for Texas in this game, that kind of the MO for Sark out of the gates has been, you mentioned that Quinn Ewers has kind of been that one read quarterback where, he's got so many weapons in the receiving core that, pretty much against any Big 12 defense, against any Big 12 secondary, they're able to get separation. And given his arm talent, and I think how he has improved year over year, just with his feel in the pocket, getting the ball out to whether it be Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, JT Sanders, early in games when defenses are still trying to figure out what Texas is doing, because Sark is so good at figuring out different layers to the offense, different plays, different ways to scheme guys open. It's really been a great situation this season. I am interested in seeing how Oklahoma State tries to disrupt Quinn Ewers and the Texas ground game. Quinn Ewers, while he has had some struggles the last few weeks, again, I think he's still been pretty good, and he's continuing to get healthier. I think he's out to kind of prove that the Oklahoma State game last year was a fluke. I mean, he's playing right up the road from where he's from. Like you said, went to South Lake Carroll, 10 miles away from Arlington, something like that. And so, he's entering a game too where, Texas is short on running back depth a little bit with Brooks out for the season. Worthy has been a little bit injured. This is going to be an important game for him to step up. And Oklahoma State last season really found a way to rattle him in Stillwater. I think it was a combination of pass rush, some different, pretty impressive bracket coverage schemes from, I believe it was Derek Mason was the defensive coordinator last year. Do you think, obviously I don't think Oklahoma State's going to deploy the same thing they did last year, but, do you think their game plan to come out of the gates will be to try to disrupt, stop the run, load the box, put it on Ewers, or, just, drop 6 or 7 back and say, hey, you can run the ball on us, but we're going to try to win this game with our defensive line and our linebackers?
Well, the style up to this point, so just setting Texas aside, so Brian Nardo is first year defensive coordinator for OSU, and his style up to this point has been very, a little bit more on the aggressive side, not necessarily like applying pressure, but they play a 3-man front, 3 safeties, similar to Iowa State, but Iowa State's very conservative. Sit back into coverage and kind of keep everything in front of you. It's not necessarily the way that he plays the 3 safety scheme. So they generally apply a lot of numbers to the run and want to stop the run. Now I will say that a lot of the teams that they played on their schedule are run heavier, so that could have been influenced by more of the opponents. So it's really tough because, as you mentioned, Texas has a lot of weapons, a lot of vertical weapons. So I still think that they're going to apply a lot of numbers to stop the run game and kind of take their chances. I'm sure you remember maybe last year, Ewers missed a few vertical balls to Worthy that really would have made a pretty big difference in that game. I would imagine that OSU would try to limit that, but I think at the end of the day, they're like, if we can stop the run game in that intermediate pass game, which is, I think, one of the scarier parts of Sark's scheme is the throwing out of the backfield and those little tight end arrow screen RPO triangle thing he does with the little spot route and the wheel route and the tight end arrow route. Those are the scary. If I'm a coach, I'm like, we need to stop the run, we need to stop the swing game, and we need to stop the intermediate RPO game. And if we give up a few deep plays to Xavier Worthy or Mitchell, then we'll live with that. But we're going to make them a little bit one-dimensional, I think, is probably the play. Now, something that probably Texas fans should be aware of is OSU is a really bad team at giving up explosive plays all year, especially in the middle of the field with their safeties in kind of an isolated coverage. So I would certainly expect Sark to try to free up probably Worthy somewhere along the lines, get them, moving pre-motion, pre-snap stuff to get him isolated on a safety for some type of big play down the field. So, anyways, I don't know if that answered the question. I was all over the place, but lots of fun matchups there.
Yeah, no, I do agree that I think that Oklahoma State, I think that makes sense for Oklahoma State if you try to come out, maybe stop the run, but also that, it's kind of hard to predict what you're going to see from either coach, I think, in this game. Again, Gundy saying that, we're going to do what we do, and that they're going to do what they do. I think that's what he said in his Monday press conference this week, essentially implying that we're just going to stay on schedule, stick to our game plan. Obviously, that's not going to be the case on Saturday, but I would be very surprised if there's like literally no wrinkles. But yeah, kind of from a matchup perspective here, how do you feel about Oklahoma State's linebackers and defensive line? Because I think that their linebackers, Sark gave them credit, said that they've been one of the best one of the best units in the Big 12. I guess the best linebackers in the Big 12 this year that they've faced. And I think that Oklahoma State's defensive line has some good pieces. Justin Kirkland's been a solid nose tackle. I think the ends have been pretty good. How do you see that? But Texas's offensive line has been really good this season. They got some big physical guys. Kelvin Banks, Christian Jones on the outside, interior. Jake Major's been doing really well.
Yeah, I think the funny thing is like I feel like the linebackers coming into this season were going to be like the weak point, and they ended up being the strength. I mean, really, if you look at it, all three linebackers for OSU are playing at really high level. I mean, Nick Martin, I don't know, could be the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. I'm not sure. I don't know the other, but certainly first team All Big 12 linebacker. I think what they do really well is side to side. So like when we're talking about like Sark, I know likes to do like a lot of two back sets, split zone where he'll fake the run and then throw the swing pass to the other running back, and that's really hard to defend. But laterally, this is a pretty good defensive team. They're a little bit vertically challenged. So I think you mentioned the defensive line. I think it's a really, really big game for them, because if this is a team that, I mean, if you think about it, if you're a linebacker and, Texas is still going to run their, counter game and their, zone runs and all that stuff. So you have to be very cognizant of a standard, more traditional run game. If you're so locked in on stopping the run, that your eyes, are into the quarterback and you miss a lot of these lateral plays that are imminent. It kind of takes away the lateral quickness and the lateral progressions that you've made. Like, this is a very good team at or around the line of scrimmage on, outside the tackles. They don't give up a lot there. But if they're so sucked in because the defensive line's not doing their job, it's going to be a real challenge. So you mentioned Justin Kirkland. He's a big piece. I think the defensive ends have been pretty average. We were really excited coming into the season about the defensive line, and I think they've been okay. Obviously, they have a big test, against a pretty good offensive line. So honestly, that matchup right there might be the whole game. If OSU's defensive line can show up and allow those linebackers to play freely, that's gonna be huge for the OSU defense. If not, Texas gets some chunk yardage in the run game, and then everything opens up. Then that's when the floodgates could open up.
Yeah, I love your assessment there, because I do think for Oklahoma State, there was some hype around the defensive line, especially with how good some of the edges have been the last few seasons. And Colin Clay and Justin Kirkland, I think, have been good on the interior, where I think that was a major weakness for the OSU defense last year. Specifically for the pass rush for Oklahoma State, we've been talking about Quinn Ewers and kind of how he was disrupted last year against Oklahoma State. I know that among like Big 12 linebackers, I think Nick Martin and Colin Oliver, correct me if I don't know if y'all know, but like I think they're the leaders in the Big 12 when it comes to quarterback pressures, maybe among all position groups, but definitely among linebackers. The 3-3-5 defense can afford some different kind of creative looks for the pass rush. I mean, I know Colin Oliver used to be an edge rusher, and so he's a very adept pass rusher coming from the outside.
Yeah, they've been pretty solid, but I think it's a little bit irregular of like what we would think about of a pass rush, like especially Nick Martin. I mean, it's not. I think a lot of them sometimes are delayed rushes, or it's not like they're sending massive amounts of pressure and they're just getting home in the general context. I mean, between the two of them, they've got over 30 tackles for loss. So, I mean, Nick Martin, I'm looking at his stats now. He's got 120 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. I mean, those Those are big numbers. And then you'll see Colin Oliver play in space. You'll see him play on the edge. They'll mix it up some. And he's had a really big year. The linebackers are playing really good football right now. So now whether that generates pressure on Quinn Ewers, this is not necessarily like I think a high velocity sack defense. They're probably gonna try to maybe disrupt him a little bit more, maybe get him off base. I know he made a few plays last week, but I don't think Ewers is probably at his best when he's moving, in traffic more or less. So I think that's probably their end goal instead of just generating a ton of stacks. But if I'm a Texas fan, I'm like, what am I going to expect from OSU fans or OSU from a defensive perspective? This is not one of those pin your ear back, amazing pass rushing teams. It's probably a little bit more of a unique disruption pass rush type.
Maybe more like a Kansas State-esque team.
Yeah, they'll generate pressure from a lot of different areas,
Yeah.
But there's not like
Kansas State's linebackers aren't as good.
Colin Oliver is a guy that if he was on the edge every play, he could potentially generate some pressure, but he's not. He plays in space a lot. So it's kind of a unique situation there. Yeah.
And talking about the Texas in the trenches versus the Oklahoma State defensive front. Tarik, one of the interesting things I was thinking about, we're facing another 3-3-5 defense this week where, traditionally against the 3-3-5 defense, you want to be able to run the ball up the middle, pound the rock, get to the second level.
We're still making the 3-3-5 into the zombie, huh?
I don't think we've really struggled against them all that much this year, but I'm just thinking
that's why so what are we bringing it up for?
Well, I'm just thinking of like how we would be able to run the ball against them, not necessarily.
As far as running the ball with this team, I'm more concerned as far as will Sark feed the hot hand? Can he find a way to use Blue and Baxter both effectively and complementarily? That's more of what I'm worried about. Texas has been able to run on everybody so far. I mean, they didn't run over Alabama, obviously, but they could still run the ball. So if you can run against Alabama, who is one of the best fronts in the country, I wouldn't worry about that too much. The key is can you find creative ways to run when Gundy adjusts, because he will adjust. He's one of the best adjusters of all time. So, I mean, that was one of the big things last year was you kept running the counter. Then Gundy said, okay, we're going to take that away from you. And then it was like, okay, we have nothing left. So you can't get into that situation again. But luckily, you now have more options in the passing game. Quinn Ewers is also older. The left tackle and guard are now sophomores, yet those other types of things. So we're more prepared.
You mentioned riding the hot hand. Jaden Blue, 10 carries, 121 yards, one touchdown last week, had that long 69-yard run to put Texas up 17-7, and it was just off from there for the Longhorns against Tech. Do you think they go more with Jaden Blue this weekend? CJ Baxter appears good to go.
I think Baxter is is kind of who you start off with, and I think Blue is who you kind of get in there after the defense has softened up a little bit. But I think Blue is running stronger every week and running behind low with his pads and things like that. What we were hoping to see from him this year, we've seen from him this year. So, and Savion Red, when he got carries, he looked good too.
That's true. I thought he ran the ball really physically last week against Tech.
But just as importantly, keep finding ways to get Jordan Whittington the ball. It's very important.
Yeah, I hope so too. I just, I've said this before. I think that a lot of times for Sark, he feels that Jordan Whittington is such a valuable blocker on the outside in the screen game or getting downfield that he wants to use him in that situation. He's more valuable there instead of with the ball in his hands. But I agree. He made a lot of plays last week, and he's been good whenever he's actually getting targeted multiple times. Kind of flip the script here, look at the Oklahoma State offense versus the Texas defense. I know we've talked some about Alan Bowman, Ollie Gordon already. pretty much the entire conversation this week when people talk about matchups has solely been Ollie Gordon versus like the Texas defensive front. We can start there. Ollie Gordon, 5 touchdowns last week, 185 yards. He's been dealing with an ankle issue, though, I believe. Okay. And so, he hasn't looked like he's been hobbled much recently, but he's been getting a ton of carries, 30 a game almost during Big 12 play.
Eventually, I think that's gonna hurt him this week against our defensive line.
That's part of my question is,
have Devondre Sweat hit you a few times and see you're not going to get up quite as fast.
Yeah, for one, do we feel like Ollie Gordon is the type of running back, depending on how Oklahoma State's offensive line holds up against Texas's defensive line, but do we feel like Ollie Gordon is the type of running back kind of like Taj Brooks did last week, where he could just bowl over people and kind of create lanes for himself?
I think he can. I don't think that's not a winning strategy against this defense. I think against the defenses that Oklahoma State's faced in the last few weeks, except for UCF, which I think was more of a fluke, but we'll not talk about that. That's worked, but I don't think for example, you're not doing that against Ford and Anthony Hill and Sweat and Murphy and Ethan Burke and things like that. I don't see him just doing some of the things he was doing last week. But he's there. Having said that, he's one of those kinds of players where you're not going to shut him down, but you can slow him down. So that's what I'm expecting.
I think a lot of it comes down to his vision and his patience. So oddly enough, when you go back and watch the BYU game, I think he had one of his worst games of the year. And if you actually go back and watch, how the plays are designed, he tends to get a little bit rogue with, and some of it probably is by design, but a lot of these counter plays, you're supposed to follow your blocks, but you also can read the linebackers on the second level. And if they're overflowing, you can cut it back. Some of that probably has some natural progression into the play, but I think what you see if you go back and look at, like, for example, the Cincinnati game and the West Virginia game, you see a lot of patience there and waiting for blocks to set up, where these massive gaping holes end up opening up that kind of come out of nowhere right at the last second. And that was when he was really operating in his top tier. Now, I understand he had 5 touchdowns and 160 yards, and I'm sitting here criticizing him, understand that, but it took 33 carries to get there, against a pretty bad defense. So to Tarik's point, you're upping the competition. So I think it's kind of twofold. Like, one, is he the type of running back that's going to be breaking tackles and things? Absolutely. He's a really great blend of balance and power and speed. The holes are going to be smaller. You're going to have to be a little bit more intentional about finding those holes and following your blocks. So if we see the Ollie Gordon that was playing against West Virginia, that's just uber patient and just there's making jump cuts and creating holes that I didn't even know existed until the last second, then you could see some serious holes potentially open up. If he's the Ollie Gordon of the BYU game, I think you could see quite a bit of struggle there, where you're dipping into that 3.5 yards per carry, and obviously that's not good for Oklahoma State. So, and regarding his injury, he hobbles sometimes, and then he'll run for a 30-yard touchdown and looks perfect. So it's very strange. It's almost like he kind of turns it on and off. Like, I'm sure he's injured. I'm not saying he's faking it, but he seems like it's a minimal injury enough for him to overcome and play when he wants to.
He and Xavier Worthy have the same.
Yeah.
It's just I remember watching the game. I was like,
I don't know.
I've seen that before. Like, oh wait, Xavier.
They gotta have some of the strongest cortisone they're shooting these guys up with, or something. Because
I'm sure it's awful.
It looked like within 3 plays, Xavier Worthy messed up his ankle, then got back out there, did a huge play, then tore his ACL, then came back out there, was returning punts again. I was like, what?
Wait, was I the only one thinking that Worthy probably shouldn't have been returning punts at that point in the game when we were up by five scores?
I think we were all thinking it, and I think it was one of those things where Worthy just went to Sark and just said, "I'm going to do it," and it maybe Sark just wasn't going to be the head coach and say no. That's what it to me.
Adam, actually, that's something I wanted to ask you too. For Ollie Gordon, right? I think the Cincinnati game was a good example of it, where like Oklahoma State was up, 25 points, and he was still feeding Ollie Gordon play after play late in the second half. I know Elijah Collins has been a little bit hurt this year. Is there just like an extreme lack of trust outside of maybe like the occasional touch for Jaden Nixon, just for all running backs outside of Ollie?
Honestly, I mean, he's certainly the number one guy by far. I mean, there's a cliff-like drop-off after him. And Jaden Nixon's just like a different type of running back. I mean, I don't see any logic behind continuing to feed him when the game is done. He even had a carry. I can't remember if it was against Houston or BYU. Or no, it definitely wasn't BYU. It had to be Houston, where the game was in hand. They were running out the clock, and they still gave him a carry. I'm like, take him out. So I don't know. I mean, Elijah Collins is a solid backup running back. So if he's injured, and it's not like Jaden Nixon can't take garbage carries. So I don't understand that at all. That didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it's just something I noticed. Yeah, that's right. I remember late in the Houston game too, because he had been hobbling off. But yeah, anyway. Okay, so I know probably got to get wrapped up here soon. For the Oklahoma State offense, this is one thing also, Adam, I mentioned earlier, I wanted to ask you, are there any ways you think that Oklahoma State can attack Texas, or any wide receivers that can give Texas problems? Jaden Bray is kind of one that sticks out to me just because I think he's a little faster than Leon Johnson and Rashad Owens, who are OSU's two bigger outside guys right now.
Yeah, I would highlight Leon Johnson. I mean, Brennan Presley, I think they're gonna try to get him his. I mean, he's got 23 catches or something the last 2 weeks. Like, he's really turning the corner, and Bowman and him have that connection, right? And everyone on the Texas sideline is gonna know where Brennan Presley is. But I think Leon Johnson is a guy that is a matchup problem, and really he's really turning into a better Jaden Bray. Like, we've been waiting for Jaden Bray to kind of break out. Actually, he had one of his better games against Baylor in the Big 12 title game 2 years ago. Jaden Bray did, and it's just kind of been a slow progression for him. Leon Johnson's the guy that kind of came out of nowhere. I saw this kid play. I went to practice up last April, and I was like, they wasted a scholarship on this kid. Like, just complete waste. Not his fault. Just went to a small school, didn't have good coaching, and the progressions he's made since then has just been insane. 6'5", good. Really, his game is ball control or body placement to go up and make those contested catches. And I know Texas has some really good aggressive cornerbacks, but not huge players, not tall necessarily. What's Muhammad? I think he's like 5'10", 5'11". Watts is.
Watts like 6'3", but he's questionable this week. Okay.
So nonetheless, I would still say Leon Johnson has that body control and the size and the range, even against a Watts, to go up and make a few plays. And to win a game like this for OSU, you have to almost be lights out on those 50-50 plays. Those jump balls, you're either getting a PI or you're winning those contested catches. So Leon Johnson would certainly be a guy that I would look at to get a vertical presence for the OSU passing game, which they don't have a lot of. So.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's interesting. Leon Johnson. I do wonder if they're going to try to attack maybe intermediate deep ball on the boundary with him, especially if Watts is limited or out, back injury. Tarik, I know you got to get up and running here soon. So, one thing that we always do with collab stuff, I like to get one. You got 10. Okay, I'll just edit this part out then. Okay, so Oklahoma State's offense versus Texas's defense. Is there a way that we feel like Alan Bowman gets to I feel there's this thing in my mind that just keeps sticking out. If Alan Bowman gets to 300 passing yards again, Texas in that situation then is probably in trouble. Or is that probably a fair number there?
Yes.
I would say I know this is kind of obvious, but if Alan Bowman has 300 passing yards, but has, let's say, 2 interceptions, I don't think it matters. Like, it has to be attached to 0 turnovers, or let's just say 1 collective OSU turnover total. But I think that he'll get to 250 for sure. Like, I have a hard time believing. I mean, he's been he's been passing for a lot of yards. It's just been really more of at least the last few weeks turnovers. So I think he's going to get there for either 2 reasons. And the first reason is that it's got a great mix of run, and the RPO game is rolling, or the fact that they're down by 21 and they've bailed on the run game, and he's going to have 55 passing attempts and be horribly inefficient, but still make it to 300 yards. So I would imagine he probably makes it there. Would be my prediction. But I think the win will be determined by the interception number and not the yardage number.
Okay. Yeah, Texas has interceptions in, I believe, 6 or 7 straight games. So they've been turning the ball over really effectively here recently. 3 interceptions against Tech. I think the DBs really showed out in that one. Malik Muhammad with his first career pick. So I do think that the Oklahoma State offense in certain ways isn't built through the air right now to attack the Texas defense as much as some other offenses they've played, that Texas has played, where, a lot of teams that have been given Texas issues have been spreading them out and attacking them with a lot of routes that require good communication, good inside leverage from the safeties and the linebackers. Brennan Presley, I could see giving them some issues there, but I don't know how many other guys Oklahoma State has that can really do that, and pose much of a threat, at least. Also, in the way of Alan Bowman managing this game, I've seen too many instances of him lately just having some horrendously bad throws or miscommunications that have resulted in turnovers. I mean, I guess that's a fair question before we kind of move on here, Adam. Do you think that phase for Bowman can get cleaned up right now, or that just seems like a weird issue?
Yeah, I think when you digest, he's thrown pick sixes in 2 consecutive games, and the caliber of either one of them is almost an embarrassing level. I mean, you're just watching him and you're like, how did this happen? So I think, when you actually break down the plays, they're not necessarily the one last week was not his fault at all. It was a miscommunication on an option route, and it was the more or less the wrong route that was run. And then the one versus Houston was just probably really more of a bad play call than anything else. But still, at the end of the day, he's the quarterback. He's throwing the ball. He's got 11 interceptions this year in 11 games, and he's only started 8 or 9 of them. So it's not like he's not an interception prone. So I think ultimately that's not necessarily like a trend. I'm not overly worried if the coaches can put them in the right position, and the receivers. He has great rapport with Rashad Owens. Seems like he's got great rapport with Leon Johnson and Presley. Bray is the question mark, and that he's been hurt and they haven't had as many reps. So I'll be interested to see how much Bray actually plays because of that, even though he's made a few plays. So I'd like to think that that's out of the egregiously bad interceptions or out of his system, but he's certainly still more than capable of throwing an interception in kind of the normal flow, where he throws it into traffic and it's his fault. We've seen that a few times as well. But I will say, to counter that, he also throws a ton of balls in tight windows that are completions. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, where his game on those RPO throws, where it's a little bit risky and the separation from the wide receivers is minimal, he's as good as it gets. I mean, in my opinion, in terms of accuracy, getting the ball out fast in these tight windows, it burns him sometimes on the interception side. So it's just a matter of, can he maybe eliminate one or two of those mistakes? He's capable, but I would say it's more likely to happen than not happen. I guess if I could guess in terms of the interceptions.
Yeah, and I mentioned the weather thing earlier. I actually have some data service for like situational stats and everything that breaks down plays really granularly. I was mentioning this on a show we did earlier this week with one of the other guys from the site, and it's weird. So you can actually get the splits of like different weather within the game.
Interesting.
And Alan Bowman has, I haven't dug past this year, but he's got 3 interceptions, no passing touchdowns in the rain this season. So, and I don't even think, because I think, what did he have, 2 or 3 against UCF, and I think that pretty much that entire game was a downpour.
I think he had 3, and then he had 2, I think, last week.
Yeah.
So
one of those was ridiculous though by the BYU guy that kind of called it over his head.
Yeah, it was a nice play, for sure. So, but I don't necessarily think in the normal flow. I mean, since this is an indoor game, when the weather hasn't been terrible, I think he's been pretty good in terms of protecting the ball. So obviously, if you're OSU, you'd want to see that happen. But if I'm Texas's defense, I'm definitely kind of knowing that there will be opportunities. He's not that safe quarterback. He will throw into tight windows, so.
Tarik, from your end, who do you see being a catalyst to get some turnovers this weekend for Texas's defense? I think this is like a Jalen Ford week, maybe?
I was going to say Anthony Hill.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, he hasn't drawn any turnovers yet this year, so that would be I don't think he has. That would be a nice showing for him for sure.
I think that's like the one thing he hasn't done. So
I know
he's be like, all right. He's like, yeah, just to close the season out right. Let me get a pick 6.
And I'll say this too,
he's been in position to do it a few times and he just hasn't done it. But
yeah, that's true. I think as Texas's run defense has gotten better this year, I think Anthony Hill's ability to find the right lane and the right gap to plug and to make plays, his ability to read where running lanes are opening to and where to go as the season has progressed is just a massive reason why Texas has improved so much in run defense and why they've been the best Big 12 run defense this year. I think he's going to be huge in both phases this weekend. He also leads all P5 true freshman linebackers in like every pass rushing category possible. So he's been awesome. Okay, and then I think this was really the last thing I wanted to mention. I meant to say this when I was talking about the Texas offense versus the Oklahoma State defense. I think JT Sanders could be huge in this game. Getting him down the seams and being able to pick off some of the Oklahoma State safeties, I think, is going to be a potential like major matchup issue for the Pokes. And then if you leave Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell one-on-one, I do think Oklahoma State's corners have been pretty good this year, Corey Black and Cam Smith, but I just think that Oklahoma State's secondary is lacking speed compared to just some of the better secondaries we've faced. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Adam. I mean, I know that they've got some, like Cam Smith and Corey Black have been pretty good this year, but I just don't know if they're as fast as we've seen, even from some like recent Oklahoma State defenses.
I think DJ McKinney's really fast, and Cale Smith's really fast. But Corey Black is more of a field corner, so he's more of like a boundary corner, more or less, where he's a little bit more bigger and physical. Cam Smith is a little bit similar to that. I think the corners have been pretty good. They just actually teams haven't thrown at them. Part of that is that their safeties have been so bad in vertical coverage that there's no reason to throw at them.
Trey Rucker has been giving up so many receiving yards. He's just been like bleeding receiving yards this year.
But he's kind of he had a huge interception against Houston, and he's unbelievable at the line of scrimmage. And he's absolutely terrible against wide receivers carrying vertical. So again, that leads you to believe that, Sark is definitely, licking his chops about finding Xavier Worthy matchups where against Rucker. And Nardo, the DC, has shown no willingness necessarily to stop what he's doing to overcome that. So So it'll be interesting to see if kind of they play some shadow games there, because it's coming. I mean, like if anyone's watching this matchup, they know that Xavier Worthy, who Sark is going to move all around, is crazy great vertical, and you got Rucker who struggles. Like that's the matchup they want. Question is are they able to bracket when that happens? And that situational play will be really interesting to monitor. So.
Yeah, the thing is this year, though, Texas has that receiver opposite Worthy that can attack you, whereas last year against Oklahoma State, they didn't.
No doubt. Yep.
And that was supposed to be Isaiah Nayor, but he suffered a season-ending injury, and that was that. But, okay, so I want to get into some predictions and stuff now. And then, Adam, what we do whenever we do a collab is we give, like, parting shots of, like, a bold prediction for the game. And so we'll get into that in a moment. But this was one interesting one that I found. So Brennan Presley this year leads the Big 12 in motion targets. I know a lot of people talk about motioning around Xavier Worthy and how much Sarks likes to do that. I gotcha. Tarik, I'll get your take on this, and then we can get score prediction from you. Who do we think is going to have more motion targets in this game? Will it be Brennan Presley or Xavier Worthy?
Presley.
Yeah. I was thinking Presley too, but I was just thinking that might try to find some ways to get Worthy the ball, take advantage, get him out in space. Adam, what about you?
This might be his last game, so I guess you might as well try.
Yeah, I think it's Presley. Like, I definitely think that Worthy's going to get plenty of targets, but I think if the more targets Presley gets, generally good things happen. And frankly, OSU just has less options than Texas. So I think that if Presley doesn't get 8, 9, 10 receptions, I'll be surprised.
Okay. Ollie Gordon this season, I do believe when he averages over 4 yards per carry and has double-digit carries, Oklahoma State. Yeah, I believe Oklahoma State is undefeated. So, does Ollie Gordon get to the mark of 4 yards per carry this week? I'm going to say no. Tarik? Oh, sorry. My bad on that. Tarik, yeah, let's get that one, and then I know score prediction from you.
Wait, you cut out a little bit. Say it again.
Oh, my bad. Ollie Gordon, over 4 yards per carry this weekend, yes or no? If y'all didn't hear me, I said no.
I'm thinking. I'm going to say no.
Okay. Adam?
I say yes. Yeah, I think it is.
All right, and then Tarik, I know you got to get up and rolling. What score prediction you got for the game this weekend?
38-17.
Okay, so you got Texas covering. Yeah. All right. You got any parting shots? Any bold predictions you want to get in before you
go? Worthy goes over 100 yards. Quinn goes over 300, and Baxter and Blue combined for over 200.
The last one of those would be. Yeah, I think that would be a real dagger for Oklahoma State for sure.
That would definitely lead to 38-17. So
yeah. I would like to see Blue get more involved late, man. He's been explosive lately. Well, he's been explosive entire time in Texas, I'm sure, but we've finally seen it some down the stretch this year. But all right, Tarik, I know you got to get up and rolling. Adam, I got 2 more if you want to go through those, and then
sure.
Give score prediction. Cool. For Texas this season. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but like I said, they're on it's 6 games. Yeah, 6 games that they've had. 6 games in a row they've had an interception. Again, Alan Bowman had some turnover issues lately. I've seen for Prize Picks they have him at 1.5 interceptions this week. Over or under? I'm actually going to go under on that.
Yeah, I think under. Kind of what you mentioned in terms of being indoor. I think he's due. He's had some pretty rough games the last few weeks, and a lot of it was weather related. So I think he'll probably have 1. I think it's probably a fair assessment.
Okay. So. And then the last one here. Yeah, there it is. I always like to do this. So I'm not trying to plug Prize Picks. I just like looking at the over-unders on it. I think it's cool to look for analytics or analytical reasons. So Quinn Ewers himself is at an over-under of 266.5 passing yards this weekend. I think that's probably a fair number. But they also have different lines where they combine his passing yards for over-under with Michael Penix. That is Washington this weekend facing Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. That's at 566.5 combined.
So
do you
like
think
300 for Penix or Penix?
Yeah. Do you think that goes over or under? 566.5 combined for Ewers and Michael Penix.
My first thought was under.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah. Because I think that Washington really played poorly versus Oregon in the first. I mean, they obviously won, but I don't know. I don't even remember how many yards he threw. He may have thrown for crazy amount of yards, but I get the feeling that it's going to be a little bit lower scoring in this round. So
he's had like barely over 350 passing yards combined the last 2 weeks. So maybe he goes off against Oregon, but I think that's under, because I actually think Ewers probably goes for around 250 this weekend. I think they're going to try to run the ball. I think Texas is going to try to run the ball more again in the second half.
It's this weird to me that I think if he goes over 266, that's good for OSU. That's I know it's really, really weird, but I feel I would parlay that back. So for example, like what did he have versus Tech? Did he even have 220 yards versus Tech?
But they ran 198.
But they ran for 300, and I'm not necessarily saying that like that's the perfect model, but I think basically the more Ewers pass attempts, the better for OSU just in general. Because generally, you'd want them to bail on the running game to a certain degree. So it's kind of this weird like correlation. So I could be like crazy wrong, but that's just my thought. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at it like it was last season where, Ewers it was one of the 2 games he threw for over 300 yards last season was against Oklahoma State, but he completed 39% of his attempts and had 3 turnovers. And so this season, though, it's been better. He had 349, 3 scores against Alabama, and obviously had a huge game there. Right. Texas defense showed up. He's had over 300 yards 4 times this season. They're 3-1. One of those that lost against, obviously coming against Oklahoma. Their only loss this season. So. Yeah, I think that's interesting. If Oklahoma State finds a way to shut down the run game for Texas, or at least like limit it, and then Quinn Ewers isn't throwing for like 400 yards, Gundy would take that, I think, 11 days out of 10.
Yeah, I think like 400 yards means that they had like some 80-yard touchdowns.
Yeah.
But let's say somewhere around 300 and hopefully a low yards per attempt means that those attempts numbers was high, rushing attempts was low, because I don't think that Sark wants to throw the ball 40 times. He wants to throw the ball 28, 29, 30 times and probably run the ball 40, 45 times. So anytime you can kind of get him out of that mold, I think that's generally positive. But anytime you're at 400 yards passing is bad anytime, like however you get there probably. So just too much.
Yeah. And, I thought about that for Oklahoma State's defense a little bit this season, where it almost seemed like a game of whack-a-mole, where like if they sold out to stop the run, then you saw them giving up 400. What did they give up to Kansas? Like 400 yards passing, 450 or something like that?
I don't remember. Here, I got
it's like
it right
the
here.
most they had all season. And they had like 90 rushing yards, and they were like one of the best rushing offenses in the Power 5 coming into that game.
They had 410 passing and 90 yards rushing, which is really strange. But like I said, that was so to your JT Sanders comment before. They gave up so many huge plays down the field, the tight ends down the seam, based on misdirection. But they stopped. I mean, at that point, Kansas was the best rushing team in the Big 12, probably. Maybe they still are. I wasn't tracking it. But I know that they're up there. So, once they're able to commit to something, they're able to do it pretty effectively. Just like you mentioned, how bad do they get beat in the areas that they're not focusing or emphasizing? So,
yeah. All right. So, score prediction time. I haven't really, usually I do my score predictions on the site like Wednesday, Thursday. So this game to me is always not my favorite to cover. I've said this on every video I've done that we've done for Oklahoma State. It just, I don't like mixing like personal fandom with like, wanting Texas to do well. And this game is like the perfect culmination of all of it, where it's like you got Texas playoff on the line, but like Oklahoma State versus Texas probably for the last time, unless they somehow meet in the 12-team playoff. So for me, I'm going to go. I don't know if Texas reaches 40 points because all this season they've kind of lived in that sweet spot between 28 and 38. So I'll go Texas 34, Oklahoma State 21. Yeah.
One thing that we haven't talked much about is how I'm not sure if it's the country or the conference, but this is the number 1 and number 2 teams in terms of field goal attempts. I think it's in the country. I'm not 100% sure, but in which, by the way, neither kicker made the Lou Groza finalist award, which is hilarious because 2 good kickers. But I think a lot of like the total score, like the over under, probably comes down to, like actually Ian Boyne mentioned this to me about the Sark likes to score from that 25 to 35 yard range. Like I think the Jordan Whittington touchdown versus or was it the tight end versus Iowa State, the
Gunnar Helm
seam play?
Yeah.
Gunnar Helm. Yeah. So like so if your red zone offense sucks, well, let's just score before we get to the red zone. That's kind of the mentality. So I think probably a lot of it will come down to like, will these teams, because they're probably going to make it into that zone a lot. OSU makes it into that zone a lot. I think OSU is number 1 in Big 12 play and plays. So they make it to the red zone a lot. They just don't score touchdowns. And Texas sounds like potentially even worse because I think they have more field goal attempts. So my score prediction is 33-23 Texas wins, and I think it includes 4 field goals from Texas, so 21 plus 12, and then 3 field goals from OSU, 14 plus 9. Or no, so 33-23. Just a lot of field goals. I think I tend to think that Gundy will bring a really good game plan. I think he's pretty good in these games, generally speaking. But there's, they have to play kind of perfect football. I don't want to say perfect football, but to win, and it's just really tough. I mean, they're going to be on a run that I think they'll need to win. What would this be? 8 of 9 games or something like that in 9 weeks. And that's a really tough task, even for a really, really resilient team. So unfortunately, I don't think that they're up for that, but I do think they cover. So.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that hasn't been talked about a lot lately, is that the bye week came at a good and a bad time for Oklahoma State this year, where like they were able to make a lot of adjustments after, what did it come after the loss to Iowa State, I think.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Able to come back, obviously played really well against the Kansas schools, pulled off that crazy upset against Kansas State. I remember looking at my phone. I thought that Oklahoma State was going to get beat pretty bad in that one, especially what had happened in the last home game against South Alabama.
Well, they were able to get back to the drawing board and saying, hey, we're going to be a downhill pistol style run game. We're going to roll with Ollie Gordon. We're going to roll with Alan Bowman. And that's when things really started to open up. It kind of started at Iowa State. Like we got some taste of it.
Yeah.
But then we got the full picture versus Kansas State, not to mention the defense played really well. So, but the backside of that, like you mentioned, is you had that bye week early, and then you got 9 consecutive games that you have no breaks on. Luckily, they're coming into this game pretty healthy, unlike 2 years ago when they faced Baylor in the Big 12 title game. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. Do you think if either team comes up with an empty red zone possession or two, that is a potential catalyst for, let's say, Oklahoma State to be able to pull the upset here?
I mean, even if forcing them to field goal, I mean, if you think about it last week, look at OSU. They march right down, first possession, get a field goal,
Yeah.
Like go down to the 5-yard line, get a turnover inside the red zone, perfect opportunity, another field goal, and then within 15 minutes of that, they're down 14-6. And I'm a big kick the field goal guy. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, like field goals are, you have to play consistent football for 4 quarters. You can't like let up, So if OSU can force Texas to a lot of these field goals, that's a huge win and that's a huge equalizer. If you think about an inconsistent, so one thing I'll say about Texas is I don't think Texas is like a world beater team, but they've been really consistent. And for at least from my lens, in terms of game to game and whatnot, they've had a few games. I think the Wyoming game was kind of rough, and some other ones that maybe they're like a little bit back. But whereas Oklahoma State, it's like quarter by quarter, you get a totally different team. I feel like, so you force a few field goals, then all of a sudden, like last week, OSU forced 6 consecutive punts from BYU. In the third quarter, and it was like bam, and then they look like they're the most dominant team ever. Well, you force a few field goals, get a few stops, score a few touchdowns, it's a new game, So that red zone defense is going to be really, really critical. So touchdowns, not field goals, is the game plan for OSU. I think Texas can still kick field goals and still win by double digits. Like, don't get me wrong, that can still happen. So,
yeah. That's fair. 'Cause, I mean, they just get on the plus side of the 50 so often because there's so many ways they can open up the field between the 20s. But that's another thing, I guess. Yeah, that's a fair point. I'd actually had that down in my notes. I'd meant to mention that I think that's a big plus for Oklahoma State here, where, yeah, Texas might have the speed and athleticism advantage on offense against Oklahoma State's defense between the 20s. But when you get into the red zone, that field condenses. There's a lot of stuff you can do with the 3-3-5 defense to, really stifle Texas. And again,
it suits their strengths too, because remember we talked about vertical threat. Well, when you're condensed field and you're talking about potentially going a little bit more wide, that's where Trey Rucker becomes a really, really good safety all of a sudden, where he was a problem before. Well, now he's a strength. And I know Sark's got all kinds of tricks in his bags that he can do to drive that, but especially when you're talking about having, a little bit of running back depth out. And I know Jaden Blue is not a power back, more of a blazer. Now I know Baxter is more of a power guy.
He is, but like he's not big yet. He's definitely not like Rojo or Bijan last year, where just seems like Bijan just seemed like he had a force field around him.
Well, Bijan's the best college running back I've ever seen, maybe other than I think he's better than Adrian Peterson in terms of like what he brings. Talk about patient runner. Oh my gosh, amazing. Perfect counter running back. So I could talk about him for a long time. But.
Yeah, my bad for interrupting you there.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I've just noticed that with Baxter lately is like he's really quick to like hit the hole. Like it's crazy when he sees a hole open up, he's through that in the blink of an eye, and like. But it just seems like when a guy's about to bring him down, that he as a runner shrinks, and not like in a good way, in a sense. Like it doesn't seem like, I don't know if it's lower body strength or just like, a lot of guys that play football in Florida, they just don't have like the facilities that we have in Texas. They don't have like even full-time paid coaches on staff at a lot of the high schools. And so unless you're at like IMG Academy or something.
Right.
And so it could be that transition. I don't know. Anyway, okay, so my bold predictions. I think it's funny you brought up Gunnar Helm because that was one of mine. I'm going to say he gets 2 receiving touchdowns. He's just been a guy that just leaks out and gets forgotten about, but he's still a very serviceable tight end. Pretty good receiving tight end, a really good blocker too. My other one is that I don't know why this has been sticking around, but I say that Alan Bowman gets 2 scramble touchdowns. So I'm going with 2 touchdowns for each offense that you would not expect. Alan Bowman, for some reason, like this is something that stuck out to me too. I don't think he's as fast, but I think he's got like a little bit of that Clint Shelf speed.
Yeah. What was it? He had a nice touchdown earlier in the year. Was it against OU? It was against OU. Yeah. Kind of had a little wiggle there, so a little bit there.
Yeah, get away from the cop speed. I don't know if you remember that, but
oh, of course, yeah. Against Texas Tech and Lubbock, was that 2013, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll give you two. I think Gunnar Helm and Whittington are like the two most important players because I think one, like, I mean, I think generally speaking, like they just kind of lull you to sleep. And I think, Texas has so many headliner playmakers that, like you said, the whack-a-mole, like you have to show so much emphasis or focus to a lot of these players. I get the feeling that, those two will probably combine for 2 touchdowns, I think, just because of the lack of emphasis showed to them. My OSU prediction would be I think Rashad Owens gets 8 catches, and I think he's probably the most important player in the whole team. Because like one, he's the emotional leader of the team, and like when he plays well, the whole team like elevates and they get more confidence. But he's also the guy, like if he starts generating separation, I think that's a really good thing because he catches everything. He's the best blocking wide receiver on the team. So I guess that prediction is a little bit more wishful thinking from an OSU perspective, but I think Rashad Owens, if he can get 8 catches, 80 yards, something like that, it's a very good sign for Oklahoma State. And that's probably not a name that most people know if you don't pay very close attention to OSU.
Yeah, Rashad, to me, it's crazy too because I heard Gundy talking about him this week, where someone asked, "Have you seen the growth in Rashad? And like, did you see it in camp?" But he's just not a guy, I think, physically that just jumps out to you in practice or anything like that. But he's made so many crazy catches this year, and like he's kind of a gamer, and
just rock solid, and just, I mean, he's a good route runner, like you said, doesn't jump off the page athletically, not crazy fast or crazy athletic. He's just really solid, and his run blocking. I mean, Ollie should, if he wins the Doak Walker, he should be one of the first guys that he thanks because a lot of those 15, 20-yard runs turned into 50-yard runs because of Rashad Owens on the outside. So
in ways, he's kind of like the Jordan Whittington of Oklahoma. I mean, Jordan Whittington, 5-star guy coming out of high school at Cuero, so different background there. But yeah, I mean, just kind of the unsung heroes of each receiving core, where Presley, gets all the big hype and everything. And so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I think that about does it. You got anything else before you're going? Anything else you want to say?
No, I'll just say looking forward to the game, and my hope is that it's much closer than the spread indicates. But I think it'll be a good game. Like you said, great atmosphere, a lot of orange, and looking forward to it. So that's it.
Yeah, Gundy with his back up against the wall usually can pull some interesting stuff out of his sleeve. So
is against the spread. I wanted to say he's like 9-2 this year against the spread, or 8-3. So, and I think they were a 12-point underdog against Kansas State.
Something like that. Yeah,
they beat the spread by 20, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. Well, anyway, Adam, thank you so much for joining. I mean, it's always fun when you get into the postseason, and having both teams still around gives us a ton to talk about. And it's nice that you still have a Big 12 team in the playoff conversation, because last year you had TCU, but it was just because of like so much chaos elsewhere in the or like around the Power 5. So
yeah, absolutely. Anyway, well, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course, anytime. But for Andrew Miller, Hook'emHeadlines.com, that's pretty much it. Welcome.